In February 1922, the major newspapers in Stockholm, the capital of Sweden, simultaneously published an advertisement. The advertisement was placed by the nobleman Count Murner. The content of the ad was, a noble king had lost his queen. Now the position of queen was vacant, and the court was without a mistress. The king was now in Sweden, and issued a decree seeking a concubine. Once selected, all living expenses would be covered, and she would also receive the title of queen. Besides the title and good treatment, the king's marriage criteria were quite low. His Majesty the King did not require a specific age, did not require a certain appearance, did not require wealth, just a kind woman, who liked children would be suitable. Once the news spread, it immediately became a huge topic throughout Sweden. On the day of the auditions, women from all walks of life in Sweden flocked to the event. The king received them at a desk. After the chat, the king would also give them a small gift, a box of chocolates for the thin ones, a bouquet of flowers for the plump ones. Reporters from major Swedish media came to report, all wanting to see the true face of this king seeking marriage. When the reporters finally got a look, everyone suddenly realized this king was indeed a real king, not a self-proclaimed fake king. However, he was not a king of Europe, but a Swedish citizen, the South Sea King, Charlie Pettersson. In 1871, some major events happened in Europe. For example, the end of the Franco-Prussian War and the establishment of the Paris Commune. But at this time, some small things also happened in Europe. For example, an illiterate Swedish farmer, Carl Wilhelm Pettersson, married the elementary school teacher, Johanna Selling. Regarding the reasons for this unlikely union, history has not recorded much, but what is certain is that, although the couple had a huge cultural difference, their relationship after marriage was very good. The husband Pettersson was very good to his wife. The couple diligently had 8 children. In this happy little family, born in 1875, Carl Emil Pettersson was the third oldest. Among the siblings, Emil was the most favored, because from a young age he was active outdoors and had a good physique, big eyes, red lips, high nose bridge, a sweet talker who knew how to get things done, clever and quick, needing no instruction. Emil stood out among the children. His childhood was very happy. His memories were filled with his parents and brothers playing in the fields. Although the family was not very wealthy, Emil was surrounded by happiness. If nothing unexpected happened, it would have been a peaceful and happy story. Of course, since it appears in this series, it is impossible for nothing unexpected to happen. When Emil was 10, the unexpected came. In 1885, a disappearance changed Emil's life. His father went missing. From a certain day in 1885, Emil's father, Pettersson, seemed to have vanished into thin air. Regarding why the patriarch left his family, Emil heard 2 stories. One was that Pettersson got into gambling, and after losing everything, decided to run away from home. The other story was that the patriarch had found another interest. Poverty strains a marriage, and he had been unfaithful. He had an affair with a village socialite, and eloped with her. In any case, from 1885, Emil's family was without its head. His mother shouldered the family's burden alone, and their quality of life plummeted. Emil, who was a student, had to drop out of school to work. From a young master, he became a dock laborer, carrying bags at the Stockholm docks. However, as a tough person, even while carrying bags, Emil managed to stand out among the workers because he was handsome, good with money, and a sweet talker at a young age. Emil quickly became the favorite at the docks. He was well liked by everyone. Although survival was no longer an issue, Emil still did not forget about finding his father. Although his father had brought great harm to the family, he still wanted to find his father, not wanting to be a son who abandoned his father. As a hub of information, the docks had all sorts of news you wanted. After several years of inquiries, in early 1890, a guy who managed the dock archives found Emil. Brother, look, this is this month's passenger list. Look here. Carl Wilhelm Pettersson. Is not this the name of the patriarch you are always talking about? Emil took a closer look. Hey, it really was his father's name. Look at the destination of the ship. Hamburg, Germany. No wonder I could never find any information in the country. So my dad went to Germany. Emil was overjoyed. Although his father was no longer in Sweden, at least he had a clue. Since he had a direction, he decided to go to Germany in his father's name to find him. Knowing his father's whereabouts, Emil hurried home to report to his mother, preparing to go to Germany to find his father. Then, he suddenly realized a very practical problem. How do I get to Germany? Although Sweden to Germany is not too far, Emil's poor family still could not afford the boat ticket. His mother approved of Emil's journey to find his father, but could only give him all kinds of support except for financial help. The family really had no money to spare. You have to find a way to get there yourself. Considering that swimming across the Baltic Sea was a bit difficult, a disappointed Emil could only return to the docks dejectedly, continue carrying bags. He talked to his friends about his troubles. At this point, a fellow worker enlightened Emil, who says you have to pay to take a boat. You can just join the army and get on a warship. The worker's words were like a wake-up call. That is right. At that time, the Swedish Navy had poor working conditions and pay, and had trouble recruiting. Basically, anyone could get in. Compared to them, they had high standards and strict requirements. I just have to become a sailor, and I can go to sea. And the Swedish Navy almost always had to resupply in Germany. I can just get off the ship in Germany, So in the summer of 1890, 15-year-old Emil joined the Swedish Navy. After more than a year of training, Emil finally, around 1892, went to Hamburg with the warship for an exchange. After arriving in Hamburg, Emil immediately applied to be discharged. This strange and unreasonable request confused the captain, but Emil showed his full service time, proving that my discharge was fully in accordance with the regulations. The army did not say you could not be discharged in a foreign country. It is no problem if I resign right here in Hamburg. Right. Faced with the articulate Emil, the captain could only agree to his discharge request. Emil at the port of Hamburg found a job carrying bags and officially began his search for his father. Since he understood German, his search for his father went very smoothly. Soon he found a clue in Bavaria. Emil rushed to Bavaria, and the locals told him there was indeed a man named Carl Wilhelm Pettersson here, but he was not doing very well. He had already sold his house and gone to the German colony of Southwest Africa. You are too late. Emil almost coughed up blood. My father is a bit too mobile. Going from Germany to Africa is not like Sweden to Germany. The poor Emil could not afford the fare, so he could only continue with his previous idea to look for opportunities to get a free ticket. Just as Emil was thinking about how to get a free ticket, an opportunity presented itself. Due to the German colonies' oppressive practices, it sparked fierce resistance from the local indigenous people. The war-torn colonies were extremely short of manpower. The German government therefore decided to form a mercenary expeditionary force to suppress the uprising. Since they were hiring mercenaries, the requirements were naturally not so strict. Emil easily mixed into the expeditionary force and got a free ticket to Namibia. After arriving at his destination, Emil discovered that the actual situation here was different from what he had imagined. There was a small difference. The resistance of the indigenous people was too fierce. The entire colony was a scene of vibrant life, a scene of flourishing things. Compared to this, even Chad was peaceful and serene. He did not even know if he could survive. Emil could only be swept along with the army deep into the unknown, and began to have intense exchanges with the indigenous people. After 2 years of fierce fighting, the indigenous people were mostly subdued. This process made Emil very sad. He was a kind person and did not want to harm anyone at all. After finding an opportunity to leave the army, Emil quickly inquired about his father's whereabouts. After many inquiries, Emil discovered he was not in Africa at all. Where are you? Then from someone else's mouth, he received news that devastated him, because the situation here was too chaotic. After the fighting intensified, your father fled. I heard he went to the new colony in Asia, the New Guinea colony. Emil was devastated to hear this news, but at least he had earned money for 2 years in the army, and he did not need a free ticket anymore. Emil quickly bought a boat ticket to Asia. In early 1898, the wandering Emil finally arrived at the German-controlled Bismarck archipelago in Nune. After disembarking, he quickly asked around, is there a man named Carl Wilhelm Pettersson here? Fortunately, the locals quickly gave Emil a reply. You mean old Wilhelm? We all know him. He is not here anymore. I heard he took a boat to America to try his luck. That old rascal. Under the Asian sky, Emil, who had been away from home for 6 years, let out a long cry. From today on, Emil, have no father, just consider me born from a rock. As it turned out, Emil's decision to give up looking for his father was correct, because the father he had chased halfway around the world was a real German. He just happened to have the same name as his father. Even if he had found him, it would have been useless. Since the return boat ticket was too expensive, Emil could only work locally. He joined a German trading company. After chasing his father halfway around the world, he could finally settle down. What Emil did not expect was that this job he found in Asia would completely change his destiny. In the trading company, Emil's position was still a sailor, traveling back and forth on cargo ships. Although the glorious history of German colonialism is not as infamous as that of Britain and France, the colonizers of any country were actually quite similar. In the Asian colonies, Germany still exploited the locals in a sustainable manner by draining the pond to get the fish. New Guinea was not rich in resources, and the natives were extremely primitive. There were even some who practiced cannibalism. For these backward native tribes, the Germans showed great mercy, with an attitude of advanced civilization, spreading the seeds of civilization to the natives, preparing to lead the tribal civilization into a slave society. You will be my slave laborers. This is also a form of civilized progress. Right. The great mercy of the Germans naturally provoked fierce resistance from the local natives. The two sides quickly clashed, each with their own ideas. This caused the already short-staffed colonial government to be even more short of people. In desperation, the colonial government ordered all Europeans to go to the countryside and conscript soldiers for the army. Let us have Asians suppress Asians. From 1902, the cargo ship Emil was on was requisitioned, and instead of trading, they started conscripting soldiers. Emil was a kind person. He did not want to do this kind of bullying work, so when conscripting soldiers, he always let people off the hook. After a while, he actually learned the native language, becoming one of the few native language translators in the company. Perhaps it is true that what goes around comes around. Since he started conscripting, Emil's ship was always unlucky. Besides encountering storms, it was even struck by lightning. Emil often told his colleague, with the immoral things we do, maybe one day we will end up in the sea. We will all go to a bad place. And his colleagues could only remain silent. And as it turns out, there is a reason why sailors are superstitious. You can't just jinx yourself. On Christmas Day 1904, Emil and his colleagues were sailing in the waters northeast of New Ireland. Late that night, a massive wave crashed into the ship's hull, and actually broke the entire ship in two. It was Christmas Eve night. Most of the crew were asleep after drinking. This sudden change sent them to a watery grave in their sleep, and when the shipwreck happened, Emil was on duty on the deck. Emil was fully awake when the ship sank, but he was still hit so hard his mouth was full of blood. By the time he gradually came to his senses, the ship had almost completely sunk. Fortunately, Emil was mentally prepared. He quickly searched for usable items and surviving colleagues. Half an hour later, Emil confirmed that he was the sole survivor. Although he did not find any living people, he found a broken thick mast, a canvas life jacket, a coil of rope, a flask of fresh water, and a flashlight. At this point, one must admire Emil's strong mental fortitude. A shipwreck at night, in a raging storm. And he was the sole survivor. If it were me, I would have been scared to death. But Emil calmly began his survival plan. He used a rope to tie one of his hands to the floating mast, so he would not have to keep swimming. He took the wire out of the flashlight and made a simple fish hook to catch fish to eat. He had a foothold, fresh water, and food. Emil believed he could definitely hold on. The reason he had to hold on was because he believed in himself and that there was still a chance of survival. The location of his accident was northeast of New Ireland. At this time, the current flowed southwest, and in the southwest direction, there were a bunch of islands. As long as he was not incredibly unlucky, he was bound to run into one, and the Pacific water temperature near the equator is relatively high, and there are fewer storms. He should not have a problem floating for a few more days. A confident Emil thus began his drifting journey. The next day, he made a very simple raft. After officially starting to drift, Emil started to save his provisions and prepared to count how many days he had been drifting. 3 days later, he realized that counting the days was just adding to his suffering, because knowing the days would only increase his loneliness and was meaningless. As it turned out, compared to the great Louis Zamperini, the first master drifter in the universe, Emil was lucky. Zamperini drifted at sea for dozens of days, while just 6 days later, Emil on the horizon saw the shadow of land. After drifting for about 6 days, around New Year's Day 1905, the exhausted Emil saw in the southwest direction some different colors. After propping himself up, Emil took a careful look at the target. He instantly sobered up. That was land. Although he was hungry and thirsty, but the hope of survival made him start paddling frantically towards the land. As the distance got closer and closer, he saw a fence made of hibiscus vines. This was not just land, but there were people on this island. An excited Emil gave up paddling and started swimming. About an hour later, with the help of the waves, Emil successfully washed ashore. He excitedly thanked the heavens. He had survived. However, Emil soon realized that he had come to a conclusion too early. There were indeed people on this island, and Emil's excitement had startled them. After his cheer, Emil saw a group of dark-skinned natives rush up and surround him. A group of natives quickly surrounded Emil tightly. Because he understood the native language from a young age, Emil could understand what they were saying. Hey, sister, look how fair he is. Yeah. And look, his eyes are blue. Hey, move over. I can't see clearly from here. Emil was relieved that he could understand the native language. He guessed that this was a native tribe that had not had contact with Europeans. No contact with Europeans. No contact with outsiders. I feel like I have forgotten something important. Suddenly, Emil heard an innocent, childlike voice. He looks so tender. He must be good to eat. This bell-like child's voice reminded Emil. Oh no. There are cannibals here. Emil let out a scream and jumped up and blindly fled. However, at this time, the enthusiastic crowd of cannibals had already surrounded him like a crowded subway station. Where are you running to? A helpful big brother knocked Emil down with one blow. The force was so great that Emil suspected maybe they were planning to eat vegetarian today. Eating a vegetable, the stunned Emil gave up resisting and was dragged back to the village by one leg by the natives. Fortunately, this group of natives was not a completely primitive tribe. They had a sense of social class. The distribution of property on the island was still basically based on the principle of communal ownership. So for this imported food ingredient, the villagers did not dare to process it on the spot, but drag Emil to see the chief. The chief's name was King Lamry. As the sole ruler of the island, who had rarely seen a foreigner, King Lamry was very interested in Emil. Very interested. He poked and prodded him, tidied up his appearance, and seriously studied cooking methods, faced with the chief's enthusiasm. Emil cried, "First marinate the meat. Then thicken the sauce. He is going to cook me in the pot. What kind of military life stew is this? This is like making caramel." Seeing that he was about to be cooked, Emil fell to his knees before the chief. "My lord, please do not eat me. It is really not worth it to eat me. I have been soaking in the water for 6 days. I am all sock. I am water-injected meat. I have no dry goods on me. I am all skin and bones. I do not taste good. I am not quality meat. Let me live. I can work. As long as you do not eat me, I can do all sorts of things." In response to Emil's plea, King Lamry, besides being surprised that he could speak the native language, also politely refused. "I also know that one should work before being eaten. But the problem is that you foreigners are too cunning. What if you run away?" Emil cried, and hugged Lamry's leg, swearing that he would absolutely not run away. Surrounded by the sea, where could he run? "I can't escape my fate. Please let me live. I eat less than a pet, and I work harder than an animal. You should just have a light meal today. Do not eat me. Okay. As Emil was begging for mercy, his pitiful appearance made the chief's young daughter laugh. As the chief's daughter, this princess, the native princess, pleaded for Emil in the native language, pleaded for Emil. Father, did not you want to be merciful? Just let him go today. King Lamri thought about it and agreed. He was not that hungry today anyway, so he decided to temporarily postpone cooking Emil. He ordered that a wooden hut be arranged for Emil in the village. Since Emil is here, let all the great craftsmen in the village rest. And so, Emil's life was temporarily spared. After his status was elevated from food ingredient to slave, Emil thrived. The villagers remained intensely curious about him and often came to his house to watch him. Faced with a group of villagers with zero knowledge, Emil was not just a public intellectual there. He was a prophet. He began to talk about all the things he had and had not seen on the island. After a few days of bragging, he became the only call on the island. After some investigation, Emil discovered that Tabar Island, where he had landed, was actually not far from the civilized world. It was just that the Germans were too short-staffed and had not gotten around to this place yet. That is why King Lamri and his people were still in the 20th century, still retained such simple eating habits. Besides his daily bragging, Emil started a great production movement on the island. He taught the natives advanced farming and fishing skills, and soon won the respect of the natives. Everyone unanimously called him Charlie. Coupled with his top-tier cultural influence, Emil truly achieved both cultural and physical success on the island, especially King Lamri's daughter, Sindhu, basically followed Emil everywhere. She was his die-hard fan. With the princess's support, Emil began planning a plantation on the island. He assured King Lamri that, as long as the plantation was established, he guaranteed that all the villagers would be well fed and would no longer have to eat people. Under the princess's constant pleading, King Lamri agreed to Emil's plan. After a year of work, Emil's plantation had a bountiful harvest. At this point, Emil finally had a reason to leave because the harvested products needed to be traded. Emil took 2 islanders with him and headed west in a small boat, preparing for Tabar Island's first trade with the civilized world. Emil was very lucky. 2 days later, they successfully landed on New Ireland. Emil's colleagues were shocked to see him, because everyone thought that there were no survivors from Emil's ship. They did not expect anyone to have survived. Emil told his colleagues his story and then got down to business. Brothers, I am not an ordinary person now. I am now the special representative of the kingdom of Tabar. First of all, brothers, I set up a plantation on the island, producing high-quality copra. Can we do some trade? And so, by exporting cope, the kingdom of Mal successfully leveraged its local resource endowments, deeply cultivated the archipelago system, and forced the transformation of the local industry, precisely filling a niche in the market. Through new pilot projects, it realized the value conversion of existing giants, and eliminated the qualitative and quantitative instability and risky behaviors, and built a key path for life cycle delivery, and opened up a more perceptible and more reusable industrial moat. In short, after starting to trade, a large amount of food was transported to Tabar Island. Emil was even recognized by the German government and was made an honorary German. The people finally achieved a healthy diet. Emil also became rich. He was as rich as Pinduoduo's 10 billion subsidy. Amidst his success, love also entered Emil's life. In 1907, the native princess Sindhu was already 16 years old. After being his little follower for 3 years, she officially made a request to King Lamri. I want to marry the foreign Charlie. King Lamri approved the marriage. Emil immediately agreed. After years of interaction, Emil actually liked Sindhu too. This innocent girl gave him the warmth of family. Emil was promoted to a higher level. In 1907, Emil officially married Sindhu. If this were the taping heavenly kingdom, he would at least be a heavenly prince consort. Of course, although it sounds beautiful, we do not need to romanticize this love story too much, because in real history, the two looked like this. After getting officially married, Emil's status on Tabar Island became even higher. King Lamri handed over almost all state affairs to Emil. Emil's status was basically equivalent to a founding father. With unified authority, the successful Emil no longer had to worry about boat tickets. He found some time to take Sindhu back to Sweden, to visit his mother and siblings. Regarding Emil's strange adventure, his family showed great interest, and warmly welcomed Sindhu's arrival. The now wealthy Emil also brought a lot of money to his family. Actually, on Tabar Island, Emil often corresponded with his family, and often asked people to deliver letters. As a result, he met many travelers. For example, a close relative of the Swedish royal family, Count Birger Murner. This nobleman who loved to travel, and Emil hit it off, and the two became close friends. The feeling of returning home made Emil happy, but at this time, he no longer regarded Sweden as his only home. After staying in Sweden for a while, Emil decided to return to Tabar Island, because his career and life were there. That was his real home. Emil and Sindhu had 8 children on Tabar Island. Besides having children, Emil, the founder of the country, also led the world's army and horse marshal, and led the people to annex the northern New Ireland, expanding his territory and consolidating his power. Emil's position was further consolidated. In 1913, the old King Lamri passed away. The great Kun Emperor and the heavenly mandate involved insults. The natives on Tabar Island all pledged allegiance to Emil. The minister believes that your majesty's heavenly virtue is wise and divine. You uphold the will of the king of Kin above, and show mercy to the people below. Your achievements are great, and you are still young and vigorous. You are both a relative and a wise man. A rare combination. May your majesty have no selfish desires. But take the hearts of the people as your heart. Forget yourself and take all things as your work to achieve great unity and unify the world. Then the people will be very happy and Tabar Island will be very prosperous. And so, after 3 refusals and 3 acceptances, Emil reluctantly accepted the will of heaven and his subjects below, and officially became the king of the kingdom of Tabar. This Swedish sailor thus achieved a new life. But Emil, who was just about to establish a new dynasty, encountered a problem, because at that time in the world, there was a small disturbance. World War I had broken out. After the outbreak of World War, Germany's power in Southeast Asia rapidly declined. Even the trade routes were cut off by Australia. Emil's once smooth trade was suddenly cut off. The people on the morning had an instant livelihood problem. To help the islanders solve their livelihood problems, Emil decided to empower new ways of playing, lay out new paths, break through information barriers, to find a deeply connected tipping point. In 1914, Emil hired a boat and returned to Sweden. Unlike his low-key return home last time, this time, Emil loudly promoted himself. The King of the South Seas has returned. After docking in Stockholm, escorted by 8 guards in island ceremonial dress, Emil and his queen, Sindhu, appeared in magnificent attire, in high profile. The whole scene was just one word: grand. Facing the swarming reporters, the king openly declared, "This is a grand state visit," with Count Murner fanning the flames. This matter quickly became a top story in Sweden, the top trending topic in the kingdom. Reporters practically broke down Emil's door, all demanding to interview this king. Emil was not at all stage shy. He spoke eloquently in front of the media. Not only did he tell his legendary story, he also gave the islanders wood carvings and local products as gifts to everyone. For the cold Sweden, this legendary experience and exotic charm deeply attracted the Swedish people, making Emil's story a household legend. Taking advantage of this popularity, Emil began to arrange for trade. A large number of Swedish merchants flocked to him, quickly dividing up the production capacity of their island. Even the transportation channels were arranged clearly. He was a pioneer of influencer marketing. The economic difficulties caused by World War were thus solved by Emil. Through this diplomatic visit, Emil saved his family fortune, and also saved the unfortunate people's livelihood. After the station ended, Emil's plantation reached its peak, because as king, Emil treated the farmers not at all with the mentality of a business owner. Emil was very good to the plantation workers. Both their wages and treatment were the best. Therefore, he always enjoyed a high reputation on the island. And as it turned out, when these workers worked hard from the bottom of their hearts, the plantation actually achieved higher efficiency. Therefore, Emil's career soared. Unfortunately, the success of the plantation did not completely change the environment on Tabar Island. The island was still a place without electricity, and without hospitals. Place outside of civilization. In 1921, Emil and Sindhu's 9th child passed away. Queen Sindhu also contracted puerperal fever. Due to the lack of antibiotic, 45-year-old Emil could only watch his wife succumb to her illness, leaving him a widower. His wife's passing was a heavy blow to Emil. His energy quickly dissipated, the volunteer business plummeted, and as a man himself, it was difficult for him to take care of these 8 children. In desperation, Emil could only return to Sweden in 1922. This led to the opening scene of the marriage proposal. But this time, Emil was not doing it for publicity, but really wanted to find a wife who could take care of the family. The marriage proposal lasted until July 1922. In the end, none of the interviewees were successfully selected. The one who became queen was the housekeeper introduced by Count Murner, Jessie Louisa Simpson. Jessie was a well-educated intellectual woman of similar age aspirations to Emil. In the end, the two successfully united. Jessie became queen of the cannibals. In January 1921, Emil and Jessie returned to Tabar Island. The two held a wedding ceremony. The newly married Emil, in addition to his happiness, also discovered a small trouble. "I seem to be going bankrupt." Returning to Tabar Island, Emil discovered that after a year of hardship, although he had gained a wife, due to the lack of management of the plantations on both islands were on the verge of bankruptcy. A helpless Emil could only start over. He had someone replan the abandoned park, introduced new coconut varieties, and even bought a rough processing production line in an attempt to industrialize and bring new industries to the island. But Emil's efforts failed this time. On the one hand, he was middle-aged and his energy was not what it used to be. On the other hand, with Sindhu's stubbornness, the gap between Emil and the Tabar people also grew day by day. In desperation, Emil had to give up rebuilding the plantation. Then outsiders were surprised to find that after abandoning the plantation, the standard of living of the Tabar people did not decline, but instead got better and better. In 1925, Emil funded the rebuilding of the island's residences, introduced a water purification system, and also set up a seafood processing plant. These 2 small islands thrived, which made many outsiders wonder, where did your money come from? These changes came from a chance small discovery. When Emil was inspecting the plantation and scouting locations, although he did not find suitable soil, he found a gold mine. Even Emil, fearing its discovery, ordered strict secrecy. The news of the discovery of a gold mine on the island was never known to outsiders. Thanks to the output of the gold mine, the 2 islands achieved leapfrog development. To this day, it is still one of the world's highest gold-producing region. Fate seemed to have once again favored Emil. However, this was just fate's final act of kindness to Emil before the end. Thanks to the gold mine, Emil accumulated a lot of money, but he was also considering the days after the gold ran out. For long-term planning, he decided to buy some stable financial products, such as Kruger's stocks. Ivar Kruger, a Swede, one of the richest men in the world, in 1908, Kruger started from a construction company. After more than 10 years of hard work, Kruger monopolized more than two-thirds of the world's match production, and became a world-renowned match king. This way, the business of a world-class tycoon with a monopoly position seemed like a safe investment in anyone's eyes. Kruger at that time received countless investments from all over Sweden, but what outsiders did not know was that, although Kruger was not a fraud, his monopoly business was built on frantic gambling and financing. It was a super high-risk business. By March 1931, rumors of Kruger's impending bankruptcy spread from the banks. In March 1932, Ivar Kruger was found to have passed away in a hotel in Paris. There are many rumors about the cause of Kruger's passing, but what is certain is that, with his passing, his business empire instantly turned to dust. The stocks became worthless paper. Emil, who had invested all his life savings, experienced the taste of overnight bankruptcy. Besides using his savings to buy stocks, he even mortgaged his future income to buy stock. Count Murner, who had also invested heavily with him, even sold his castle. After half a lifetime of hard work, it all went down the drain overnight. The heartbroken Emil and his wife contracted malaria. The two suffered from the torment of the disease. In 1934, his wife Jessie developed breast cancer and could only go to Australia for contact. The surgery used up all the family's last bit of money. However, even so, the surgery failed. The doctor gave the final advice: there is still time, go home. Emil wanted to return to Sweden with his wife, but at this time, he really had no money. He could only arrange for his wife to go back first, and find a way to buy a boat ticket himself. Emil, who had left his hometown 44 years ago, was worried about the boat ticket. Unexpectedly, after a lifetime of wandering, the elderly Emil still could not afford that boat ticket that was so important to him. In March 1935, Jessie returned to Sweden. She told the media that Emil's situation was very bad. He was selling his assets to raise money, but no one was accepting. 2 months later, Jessie passed away in Sweden, and Emil was stranded in Australia, unable to advance or retreat. He also wanted to go home, but this wish was simply impossible to realize. Whether it was Sweden or their island, he could not go back. On May 12, 1937, the Swedish sailor, honorary German, King of Tabar, Carl Emil Pettersson, passed away in Sydney from a sudden heart attack at the age of 61. His young daughter, Hannah, was also left there. For many years to come, Hannah could not adapt to life in Australia because Hannah, whose memories were all on the island, could not adapt to the city. But throughout her life, she was never able to return to the small island where she spent her childhood. In the winter of 1941, a little girl named Karin Lindgren, because of pneumonia, was bedridden. Her mother, Astrid Lindgren, to alleviate her daughter's suffering, made up a story. She recalled that incredibly lively marriage proposal from 20 years ago. So Astrid told her daughter, "There is a girl with fiery red hair, who is incredibly strong and loves adventure. Her name is Pippi. Pippi is from the South Seas. She has endless gold. Her mother passed away early, but she is kind-hearted. She subdued many bad guys and created countless miracles." This Pippi Longstocking story later became popular all over the world, and became Sweden's most famous fairy tale. Few people know that Pippi Longstocking was not entirely fictional. Behind it there is a legendary story like Emil's. But Emil probably would not regret his anonymity, because compared to the harsh reality in the fairy tale of Pippi Longstocking, Pippi is a carefree little girl. She and her friends are forever in the fairy tale world, living happily ever after.